I wanted to talk now about Zionism, and this is a topic that, if I had started maybe making videos 3 or 4 years ago, I almost certainly would have talked about. And then I thought better of it, uh, and now I'd like to talk about it, but in a different way than I originally would have. The reason I thought, originally I would have said, "Hey, Israel does all these bad things and oppresses the Palestinians and blah blah blah," and of course all that's true. Uh, but the reason I uh, thought differently was because uh, it was pointed out to me that yes, Israel is bad, but so is basically all other states. And if we want to rank them, Israel's nowhere near the top. So what's the point really in saying that? I mean, the American government is by far worse than the Israeli government. Then of course there's the Russian, the Chinese, the UK, the French, uh, the Indian. There's if we had to rank them, I mean, it wouldn't be at the bottom, but it wouldn't be at the top either. Uh, However, I like to come at it from a different angle. A week or two ago, I listened to an interview on the Scott Horton show with Gabriel Kolko. If you don't know who either of these are, Scott Horton is a radio host. He started his own radio show in the late 90s, I want to say. He's currently on LRN, but he's been on other networks in the past. The name of his show is Anti-War Radio. If you go to his website, scotthortonshow.com, he has approximately 1,500 interviews on there, and it's basically a libertarian treasure trove. He's interviewed everybody who's anybody. He's interviewed Ron Paul dozens of times, Lou Rockwell, Tom Woods, Joe Salerno. He did interviews with Hans Hermann Hoppe, which basically got me to where I am today. Uh, and that's, I mean, I couldn't possibly name them all because there's so many. Um, and if anyone who's interested to just browse somebody who you appreciate, Scott is a very smart guy, super well informed, especially when it comes to foreign policy and libertarian theory. He's a hardcore anarcho-capitalist in the vein of Rothbard and Mises, and he knows his stuff. Anyway, Kolko is different. Kolko is a socialist. If some of you may have remember, I have recommended his book before. He wrote a book called The Triumph of Conservatism about the progressive era. Uh, Despite the fact that he's a Marxist, he recognized that the progressive era was not an example of government restraining business, but actually business using government to restrain its competition and enrich itself. And Triumph of Conservatism is basically an empirical study of that, and it's a great book. Um, and you can uh, do away with all the accusations that, if you claim that, people are just going to say, oh, that is just a biased pro-market book. That must be a Milton Friedman book. No, it's from a neo-Marxist, some kind of socialist. It's not clear to me what exactly Kolko is, but that's how he identifies and why he would basically exonerate free markets as monopoly destroying and wealth uh, redistributing. I don't know, but he did. Maybe he's just that intellectually honest. Anyway, they talked about Israel, and he brought up some points that I thought were interesting. Uh, he and the thing that he said that I thought was very interesting is he said currently there is for the first time in its history, there are more Jews leaving Israel than are coming to it. There's more emigration than there is immigration, and it's interesting because the ones who are leaving tend to be the most educated, the most highly skilled. They're coming to the United States. They're becoming doctors. They're going to Silicon Valley. They're going to Australia. They're going to the UK, to Holland. They're highly skilled people. The people who are coming in are mostly extremely unskilled Eastern Europeans from the Ukraine, from Russia, from Belarus, and it would probably be a stretch to call them peasants, but that's just, I find, the most descriptive term here. They're given subsidized housing, paid for by our tax dollars, at least in part, and they move in. And the reason that Kolko gives for this is that Israelis who have better things to do than be in the military their whole life get tired of being in the military their whole lives and they want to leave. They'd rather relax. People want to go and do what they want to do with their time. They want to spend time with their family. They want to go to the beach. They want to watch movies. They want to race cars. Whatever floats their boat. Whatever makes them happy. And in Israel. Of course, there's 100% draft, men and women at a certain age group. But even when that's done, you're held, however many weekends a year for many decades after that, and it gets old. And it's interesting, and Kolko points out, back in the end of the 19th century, when Zionism as a ideology was being developed, uh, Herzl and the others who were coming up with it were basically, their complaint was that they were being forced to serve in the militaries, primarily in Europe, especially in Germany and the UK. And Jews at the time thought, why are we being forced to fight for the Kaiser and the Kaiser's army? Why can't we just live our own way the way we want to? And consistent with the nationalism that was extremely prevalent at this time period, the solution, so-called, that Zionists came up with was, let's have a Jewish state, and then we won't be forcing Jews to do things that they don't want to. And this is why I think it's interesting, because I think this proves the point that the promise of statism, the promise of national statism, is a lie, and it can't give you what it is you're looking for. If what you're looking for is a better life and peace and freedom, the Jewish state conscripts its citizens at least as much, if not more so, than they were in their oppressive so-called European homelands. The fact that the Israeli state picks on Palestinians even more than Jews does not mean it does not pick on Jews. They're taxed, they're regulated, and they're conscripted. And people don't want to live that way. And I guess we can forgive Zionists, especially the early ones, for just assuming this must be the solution. As it turns out, though, it's not. They would be much better off without a state, whether that be the Israeli state or the German state or the American state, for that matter. And so I do think it's an interesting example of the promise of statism failing yet again, as it always and invariably does, assuming that you're looking for something that's good and not terrible and evil. The Jews in Israel are oppressed by the state of Israel. Like I said, perhaps not to the degree that the Palestinians are. That doesn't make it okay. That doesn't mean that they're happy. If you're being conscripted, then you're being taxed, and your life suffers because of that. It's unlikely that you will feel exonerated and justified if you see someone else being punished that much more. Sometimes it happens. There is a phenomenon, there's probably a name for it, I don't know what it is, where your suffering makes you want others to suffer even more and maybe revel in their suffering. And perhaps to a degree this is happening in Israel. Although I don't know that the state of Israel oppresses the Jews that much more than any other state would oppress the Jews wherever they live, other than the conscription thing. But I don't know about the specifics of how Israel is. So I thought that was interesting, and I think that I don't think that the Jews that are leaving are hardcore libertarians. I think that they're much more pragmatic. They just would rather make more money and have their weekends to themselves. However, that pragmatism is belying a deeper theoretical and natural truth. That is, you can imagine a state just providing you with freedom, but it requires your subservience, and it requires that you lose your freedom for it to even work. And so it is a contradiction born. It's born as a contradiction, and it will never satisfy your wants in that regard. So anyway, that's it on this one.